Good morning and welcome to the Minneapolis Institute of Art and the Friends Lecture Series. My name is Barbara Proschel, and I'm president of the Friends of the Institute. Happy New Year. Yeah. It has been a very chilly start of this year, 2025. In fact, I think the predicted high today is 20 degrees, and that's considered a warming trend. But we have a full house. So thank you for coming to join us today, coming out of the cold to join us to hear from our MIA curator, Galina Olmsted, and she'll be helping us explore 19th century Parisian nightlife and the art of Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. But first, a word from our sponsor. So this lecture is presented by the Friends of the Institute with generous support from the Mark and Mary Goff Fitterman Fund. And you'll note some of our upcoming Friends events. On February 7th, a member tour to the Caucasian Art Trust. Our February lecture is on the 20th in the evening, 6 p.m., with multimedia artist Deborah Roberts. And then we'll have a member tour that starts the hour before. On Friday and Saturday, the 21st and 22nd, we have a book club, and that's a discussion and a tour. And the book for the month is Deacon King Kong. So just a quick reminder to please silence your cell phones, and during the question and answer period, if you could wait for the mic to be passed to you. And now I'd like to introduce Rachel McGarry, who in turn will introduce Galina Olmsted. Rachel is a familiar face to many of us and needs little introduction. She is the Elizabeth Macmillan Chair of European Art and curator of European paintings and works on paper. Rachel joined MIA in 2006, and we are very lucky to have her. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Rachel McGarry to the stage.
Good morning. Happy New Year. It is so thrilling and such a privilege for me to be able to introduce Dr. Galina Olmsted, MIA's Associate Curator of European Art today. Many of you have had the privilege of getting to know Galina this past year as she started her position exactly 1 year ago. And it's rather astonishing to think about what Galina has accomplished in this short time. There's been much activity in addition to the wonderful Toulouse-Lautrec exhibition that she organized around the Art Institute of Chicago loan, which she will be talking about today. There have been new installations that you all have seen in the European galleries, many acquisitions, lots of research on the permanent collection, focus shows on Cassatt, and soon to open a Monet and Hokusai exhibition and an exhibition on the Jazz Age. So this is just the beginning. Galina brings deep museum experience with her to MIA. She must have started working at museums in elementary school because she's worked at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Barnes Foundation, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and we hired her away from the Eskenazi Museum of Art at Indiana University, where she was curator of paintings. Galina attended Georgetown University, double majoring in English and art history. She earned an MA at Case Western Reserve University and a PhD at the University of Delaware, specializing in 19th century French painting and writing her dissertation on Gustave Caillebotte. She has lectured and published widely. Most recently, she contributed to the critically acclaimed Gustave Caillebotte exhibition and catalog, which is now on view at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. And that show heads to the Getty next, hopefully. And then it will be at the Art Institute of Chicago next summer. Galina began work at MIA in January 2024 because everyone wants to come move to Minnesota in January, I think. If it is not our extreme climate that's the selling point for everyone, it is MIA's exceptional collection, which is a huge draw. The posting for Galina's position called for a specialist of 19th and 20th century European art which is a particularly star-studded area of the collection, and over 200 people applied. We interviewed numerous candidates over 3 rounds, many very accomplished scholars and curators with outstanding educations and publications. Galina was really a standout at every stage. And even before we started interviews, I was getting unsolicited calls and emails from very important people in the field, both hers and mine. And it was interesting. One reference didn't mince her words and told me we would be so lucky to have Galina and we would never find anyone like her. And an Italian Baroque professor whom I'm friends with, as soon as he heard that she had applied for the MIA job, wrote me an email and said, quote, "I am a ginormous fan, and could we please have a call or Zoom just to talk about Galina because she's so great." So needless to say, I was really looking forward to meeting her, and at her 1-year anniversary in Minneapolis, I'm very happy to count her as a colleague. Galina is brilliant and knowledgeable and curious and has a great eye. And I also love that a year in, she remains totally in awe of Mia's collection of European paintings. And she's also very, very passionate about her field of focus. In Galina's eyes, nothing in the world rivals French 19th century painting. And I'm pretty sure she will convince many of you that this supposition is an a priori truth after you hear her speak on the subject and feast your eyes on the works that she's talking about. And I just have to mention that Galina took the leap and moved to Minneapolis with her husband, a professor of brain science, I kid you not, her mother, a scholar, a distinguished scholar of Spanish and Russian language, and her 2 young, energetic sons, one of whom is still a toddler. So we're all happy that she made the leap, and they did too. And please help me to give a warm welcome to Galina Olmsted.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction, Rachel, and thank you, friends of the Institute, for inviting me to give this month's lecture. As Rachel said, last week marked my 1-year anniversary at MIA, and a real highlight of this first year has been getting to know so many of you through various events, and especially through time together in the galleries. And I'm looking forward to so much more of that ahead in 2025. So I'm especially glad to join you all this morning to talk about At the Moulin Rouge, which is on view in Belfort through March 9th. The exhibition explores the transformation of Parisian nightlife at the turn of the century, the nightclubs and cabarets of Montmartre with their glittering lights and dazzling entertainments. I imagine many of you have had the opportunity to see the exhibition already. So for today's talk, I'll walk you through the history of the painting with a particular focus on the lives of 3 of the women pictured here, Milton, Jane Avril, and Louise Weber. And then finally, by request of our organizers, I'll close with a few 19th and 20th century acquisitions from the past year. So it'll be a little bit of a belated end of the year roundup. At the Moulin Rouge, the exhibition hinges on the once-in-a-lifetime loan of Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec's masterpiece by the same name from the Art Institute of Chicago, a painting famous for its wild and dizzying distortions and for its hallowed place in the 1970s board game Masterpiece. Toulouse, you would not believe the number of times I've heard that. You all remember it well. Toulouse-Lautrec's masterpiece is in every way a quintessentially Parisian picture, cementing his status as the quintessential Parisian artist of the 1890s. But he was not born in Paris and certainly not born into the life of bohemian decadence that we see pictured in this scene. Born instead to an aristocratic family in Albi in 1864, Toulouse-Lautrec was his parents' first and only child to survive beyond infancy. If he had outlived his father, which sadly he does not, he would have been the Comte de Toulouse-Lautrec. Although he was born into extraordinary privilege and wealth, he suffered considerably in his youth. Due to a rare genetic condition, his legs stopped growing in adolescence following 2 separate accidents where he broke each of his femurs in succession. As an adult, he was under 5 feet tall and he walked with great difficulty, often using a cane. He compensated for his physical disability with a sharp, self-deprecating wit, often depicting himself next to his tall cousin, his very tall cousin. You see that's a detail from the Chicago picture. They're walking along the back of the canvas. And then posing for photographs in costume. So I have an example here on the right. He also poses in women's clothing. He poses as a clown. He has a good sense of humor about himself and about his size. It's during periods of convalescence from those accidents suffered in his youth that he begins to paint and draw, so there is one silver lining. His earliest teacher, René Princeteau, was known for his fashionable sporting pictures, and Toulouse-Lautrec cultivated an early interest in horses, making equestrian portraits and racing pictures throughout his career. So from Mia's collection Le Jockey from 1899, published just 2 years before his death, shows Toulouse-Lautrec's lifelong fascination with racehorses, particularly in motion, shown here galloping towards the finish line at the famous Longchamp racetrack in Paris, or just outside. In 1882, at the age of 18, Toulouse-Lautrec moved to Paris, and he settles in Montmartre, and that's where he'll live for the remainder of his life. As a young artist, he must have felt that he had landed in the center of the universe. He felt like I do about 19th century French painting. Just 2 years later, in 1884, Rodolphe Salis would write, quote, "What is Montmartre? Nothing. What must it be? Everything." Toulouse-Lautrec found his people there, a chosen community of other artists, performers, and writers who frequented the various bohemian haunts of what is now one of Paris's most famous neighborhoods. He trained in the studios of Léon Bonnat and Fernand Courmont, befriending fellow artists such as Émile Bernard and Vincent van Gogh. So you see here his portraits of Bernard and of Van Gogh that he makes. He's quite a young man at this point. It's the mid-1880s. Like so many of his generation, he was inspired by the innovation and success of the Impressionist painters, especially Edgar Degas, with whom he shared an affinity for horse racing and for nightlife scenes. So you see here at right an example of the sort of horse racing pictures that Degas was doing, and you can see how Toulouse-Lautrec must have felt very inspired by those. By the mid-1880s, he had begun to find success as an artist, exhibiting his works first at cabarets and nightclubs, then in more official venues such as Les Vins in Brussels and the Salon des Indépendants in Paris. He experimented with new techniques, using peinture à l'essence, or oil paint thinned with turpentine, to render loose, visible brushwork. And even as he followed the trend for plein air painting, posing his sitters in a neighbor's garden, he was fascinated by sordid subjects. In The Streetwalker, and that's a title he gives this picture, from 1890, who portrays a famous prostitute nicknamed Casque d'Or, or Golden Helmet, for that distinctive hairstyle. He portrays her in a tranquil daytime setting, completely at odds with her flamboyant reputation. As his star continued to rise in the 1880s and into the 1890s, Toulouse-Lautrec was a fixture of Parisian nightlife, frequenting clubs such as Le Chat Noir and Le Merliton. And visitors to the exhibition will recognize these three extraordinary posters from Mia's collection, advertising Aristide Bruant's performances at Le Merliton at Center, and then at other nightclubs throughout Paris. Those venues and the entertainments he found there became a mainstay of Toulouse-Lautrec's artistic practice, embodying the ideas set forth by Charles Baudelaire in his essay The Painter of Modern Life, first published in 1863. Baudelaire insisted that artists leave their studios and go out into the crowds to capture the customs, gestures, and appearances of their distinctly modern era. He wrote that art could express beauty, and more importantly, truth, only if it was based on the direct experience of life. No artist of fin de siècle Parisian nightlife captured those convictions better than Toulouse-Lautrec. The boisterous Garden Café Concert that would become the famous Moulin Rouge nightclub first opened in October 1889. One of the club's owners bought a painting from Toulouse-Lautrec to hang near the entrance, and that's the painting here at right called Equestrienne. It's now also at Chicago. In the decade ahead, Toulouse-Lautrec became an unofficial chronicler of the Moulin Rouge, capturing its entertainers and patrons in drawings, paintings, and prints. Of those dozens of works, At the Moulin Rouge stands apart as a monumental group portrait, a testament to Toulouse-Lautrec's status as court artist to the stars of Montmartre. Painted between 1892 and 1895, it captures what must have been a familiar scene to the artist. Rather than hiring models, he recruited his friends and family to pose for him. At center, a group is gathered around a table for drinks and conversation. And that's Jane Avril with her back to us, recognizable by the bright red-orange hair that was her signature look. Behind the group, the artist and his cousin cross in front of the mirrored wall, while two dancers pause for a moment. One of them, known by her stage name La Goulue, reaches back to adjust her hair. From the right edge of the canvas, the English performer May Milton leans towards us, her face cast in a shock of electric green. And I use that phrase, electric green, deliberately. What Toulouse-Lautrec is capturing here is the advent of electric lighting indoors. The Moulin Rouge was among the first venues in Paris to introduce electric lighting indoors, and this new technology affected or created effects and distortions that were ripe for exploration by an artist like Toulouse-Lautrec. He takes care to document the other modes of artificial illumination still in use: the candlelight on the table that casts sitters in varying spotlights and shadows, and the gas globes affixed to the mirror that runs along the back of the composition, creating these eerie double orbs of light. Candle, gas, and electric light swirl together in the space of the picture, creating a disorienting effect. Our unease is amplified by the plunging diagonal of the balustrade that separates us from the seated group, and by the tipped-up floorboards that feel unsteady under our feet. This is in every way a painting of its moment, in its moods, its technologies, and its celebrities. That is, until its moment passed. So this is a special edition of the magazine Le Figaro Illustré, published in April 1902, less than 1 year after Toulouse-Lautrec's death. And so what you see it right here is a reproduction of the painting, and you can see that it's cropped, but it's not cropped for publication. Instead, the canvas itself was cropped, cutting away the figure of May Milton entirely. And so here you can see how it appeared in 1902, really just less than a year after the death of the artist. But why? Toulouse-Lautrec's death at the age of 36 was a painful, drawn-out affair as he descended into illness and addiction over a period of several years. He endured weeks of hospitalization, including one long stay in a sanatorium in 1899, before succumbing to complications from syphilis and alcoholism in 1901. After his death, his friend and art dealer Maurice Joyon worked closely with the artist's mother to manage his estate. Due to his fame in Paris, Toulouse-Lautrec's death was sensationalized in the tabloids, leveraged as a cautionary tale of bohemian decadence, deviance, and excess. Together, Joyon and the Comtesse de Toulouse-Lautrec sought to rehabilitate the artist's reputation, to preserve his legacy, and perhaps to make his works more saleable. With those goals in mind, Joyon cut away 2 strips of fabric, removing the plunging diagonal of the balustrade and excising the face of May Milton entirely. He was left with a much more conventional group portrait, robbed of its innovation and of its dizzying pleasure. Fortunately, collectors must have felt, as I do, that it was too conventional, too dull, and the painting did not sell. The pieces of canvas were reattached by some future owner by 1914, and in 1928, the painting entered the collection of the Art Institute of Chicago. So who was May Milton, this unforgettable face, cut away and later reunited with her coterie of Moulin Rouge regulars? Most of her biography has been lost to time, and May Milton endures in our cultural imagination primarily through the images of her that were made by Toulouse-Lautrec. A veteran of music halls in England, we know that she performed at the Moulin Rouge for a single season, quickly falling in with Toulouse-Lautrec and his crowd. About her brief tenure, Maurice Joyon, that same art dealer, wrote that she was short on talent and beauty, with, quote, a pale, clown-like face, rather like that of a bulldog. You'll note, I resisted including a photograph of Maurice Joyon, but you would not be impressed. Others were even more outrageously offensive in their critiques, but it's 11 o'clock in the morning, so we won't get into it. So the group portrait, where she appears as one of the most memorable faces in the 19th century, was Toulouse-Lautrec's first image of her. He went on to make a handful of others, including this commissioned poster, in 1895, thought to advertise a tour in the United States. Perhaps it never came to pass. There's no evidence that that tour ever took place. It is one of Toulouse-Lautrec's boldest compositions in its patterning of flat, simplified, brightly colored shapes. Deceptively simple in its design, the poster is complex in its execution, requiring 5 lithographic stones. The poster captures May Milton's pinched features, strawberry blonde hair, and a girlish white dress, kicked up by her double-jointed leg to reveal a glimpse of red patterned fabric beneath. The vibrant blue background positions the poster as a pendant with Toulouse-Lautrec's image of the Irish singer May Belfort, made the same year. Milton and Belfort were romantically involved, and by conceiving these posters as pendants, Toulouse-Lautrec made them appear in print as they were in life. Joyon noted that the posters were a set, writing, quote, "Lautrec took care to make thoroughly English posters, the gleaming red of the first vying with the blue of the second." May Belfort went on to become one of the artist's favorite models, appearing in several prints, paintings, and drawings, while May Milton appears in just a handful of works before fading into obscurity after 1896. The enduring appeal of Toulouse-Lautrec's image of her is evident in Picasso's The Blue Room from 1901, where the poster of May Milton hangs on the wall. In 1893, the Belgian painter Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec wrote to his father about the Moulin Rouge, quote, "Heads pass by in the crowd, oh heads, green, red, yellow, orange, violet. Vice up for auction. One could put on the door front, people abandon all modesty here." In its complete state, Toulouse-Lautrec's painting could stand as an illustration for Väinö's description of the nightclub. These brightly colored heads, the green May Milton, and with her back turned to us, the orange-red of Jane Avril. Rumored to be the daughter of a prostitute and an Italian aristocrat, Jane Avril was raised in poverty by an abusive mother and ran away from home as a young teenager, landing at the Salpêtrière hospital at the age of 14. She was diagnosed with what was then called St. Vitus's disease, or now known as rheumatic chorea. It's a disorder characterized by rapid, uncoordinated jerking of the hands, feet, and face. In her memoirs, first published in 1933, she claims that when she discovered dancing at a social event hosted by the hospital, her symptoms disappeared. Whether or not this story is true, she incorporates the mannerisms characteristic of that illness into her dance style. She starts working odd and often unglamorous jobs. She works as a laundress, for example, during the day, while she pursues a career as a performer at night. She became known both for her sensual dancing and for her ethereal detachment, giving her what the writer Arthur Symons describes as, quote, "an air of depraved virginity." It's charming. She became a fixture at the Moulin Rouge soon after it opened in 1889, and her celebrity was launched along with that of Toulouse-Lautrec, their stars rising in tandem. The artist knew Avril as both a friend and a celebrity, depicting her in both roles. His paintings of her in her private realm, including a fully realized half-length portrait and views like this one of her outside the Moulin Rouge, show a sensitivity to her inner life. In his painting of her leaving the Moulin Rouge, now at the Wadsworth Athenaeum, she walks with her collar turned up, her hands in the pockets of her heavy midnight blue coat, a melancholic contrast to the glittering walls and pavements of the nightclub's exit. The symbolist writer, Edouard Dujardin, walks away from her, his back turned, but his burgundy coat and blonde hair familiar from At the Moulin Rouge, so he's the figure that sits all the way to the left in that group portrait. Cast out from the glittering lights at the end of the evening, performer and spectator ignore each other. In his images of her as a dancer, Toulouse-Lautrec allows Avril a measure of privacy, not offering her fully for public consumption as he does with his images of Mays, Milton, and Belfort. In his poster advertising Mademoiselle Eglantine's troupe, of which Mia has 2 versions, you see one here on the left, Avril is pictured at far left, her eyes turned away from the viewer. Instead, all of our focus is directed to the froth of swirling petticoats, raised to reveal kicking burgundy stockings. Once more, Toulouse-Lautrec's lasting influence is evident in the work of Picasso, whose 1901 watercolor study for a poster advertising the Jardin de Paris owes much, if not everything, to the older artist's design. Celebrity was their collaborative venture, and Avril was among Toulouse-Lautrec's closest confidants, a loyal friend and patron throughout his life. Just a few years after his death, she retired from performing and married the painter Maurice Billet, moving to the outskirts of Paris. She's widowed and then bankrupted by the economic crash that rattled France in the 1930s, and she dies in poverty and obscurity in 1943. Toulouse-Lautrec's images of her and her shock of bright red hair, instantly recognizable from any angle, endure as some of the most popular images of Paris in the 1890s. The most enigmatic figure of At the Moulin Rouge is perhaps the dancer who stands to the right of the artist and his cousin, catching her own reflection in the mirror and adjusting her hair with both hands, her back arched towards us. La Goulue was the stage name used by Louise Weber. It means the glutton. She was known for, as she would dance, she would stop by your table and take your drink and down it in front of you. I think it also, she's a sort of, has a hearty appetite for the pleasures of life. The daughter of a laundress, Weber would later claim that she would dress up in customers' clothes and pretend to be a famous dancer. As a young woman, she began to perform in smaller clubs around Paris. That's where she meets the painter Pierre-Auguste Renoir, that Renoir from upstairs. He introduced her to a community of artists and models, and she continued to develop her repertoire as a dancer. Soon after the opening of the Moulin Rouge, she performed an early version of the can-can known as the Chahou, and she was an instant star, booked as a recurring headliner. She became known as the Queen of Montmartre, and at the height of her fame, she was the highest paid entertainer in Paris. In 1892, the Moulin Rouge's owners commissioned Toulouse-Lautrec to make a poster advertising the nightclub. The resulting image, this poster is about 6 feet tall, comprised of 3 sheets, and it is his first attempt at lithography, so he's right to have run with that. It's an instant sensation. 3,000 copies were printed and began to circulate throughout the city, pasted as advertisements, of course, but also collected straight away by admirers of the poster's innovative design, bold colors, and simplified forms. About this earliest poster, the critic Félix Fénéon wrote in 1893, quote, "That Lautrec's got a hell of a nerve and no mistake. No half measures the way he draws or the way he colors either. Great flat dollops of white, black, and red, forms all simplified. That's all there is to it." Weber is the only figure to appear in full color, kicking up her leg in the finale of the Chahou, the dance that made her a star. Her petticoat is a white cloud swirling around her hips and knees, depicted with just a few lines. Globe lights are strung above the silhouetted spectators, while a ring of 3 lights seems to swing towards us. Are we standing on the dance floor, the ceiling, or somewhere in between? In the foreground, her dance partner, Jacques Renaudin, poses with characteristic elegance and fluidity. Known by the stage name Valentin Désossé, Valentin the Boneless, his performance, I love that name so much, his performances were near acrobatic, sailing effortlessly between partners and positions. Weber and Renaudin were famous for their joint performances, and Toulouse-Lautrec made countless other images of them dancing together, such as this painting now in the collection of the Musée d'Orsay. They dance and swirl under strings of globe lights, but as you can see, the figure of Renaudin has been damaged. This was part of a commission from Weber to Toulouse-Lautrec to hang outside of her booth at a traveling fair, and the panels endured several seasons outdoors. But I love that we have this photo, so I wanted to take the time to show you. You can see, here's the painting here. It's huge. Here's the painting here at left, and it retains all that rich color in his suit that's been completely faded away. That's why we keep the buildings indoors here at MIA. So you can see, too, that this painting was cut by a scrupulous dealer at some point after the artist's death. So that remains evident as it does when you look closely at the Moulin Rouge. This figure was cut out of the painting and collected separately. And then all of the painting's pieces were recollected and assembled, thankfully, by the Musée d'Orsay in 1930. I love this painting so much. Just as he had done for Jane Avril, Toulouse-Lautrec made paintings of Weber arriving at the Moulin Rouge, images that teeter at that moment between daytime realities and nighttime fantasies. Absent in his most famous painting of Weber, it's now at MoMA, absent, however, is that cool melancholy of an upturned collar and hands slid deep into pockets. Instead, she strides into the space in a low-cut dress and black ribbon choker, her hair tied in a knot at the top of her head. She's flanked by her sister on the right and an unidentified handler on the left. I love the contrast between that paw of the other woman and that tiny waist of Louise Weber. She walks into the Moulin Rouge with audacious, outrageous confidence, greeting her adoring audience with eyebrows raised and a half snarl. Toulouse-Lautrec understood Weber, but he also understood la Goulue, celebrating her brash arrogance and transforming her into an idol of hardened glamour. Weber left the Moulin Rouge in 1895. She set out on her own, as we saw the photo of her sort of caravan that would move as part of traveling fairs, but she was never able to recreate the success of her act outside of the walls of the Moulin Rouge. By the 1920s, she was living in poverty in a caravan outside of Paris, where a photographer found her and took her portrait. And she dies in 1929. Before she dies, one of those photographers was able to take these images of her dancing. Oh no. Here we go. And there's no sound. It's really short, so we're gonna watch it again. I love it. I can't tell you. She's so beautiful and elegant, and she's in her late 50s here. I was thrilled. Speaking of Heathrow Airport, I found that video sitting in Heathrow Airport, and since then I've watched it 200, 300 times. It's so moving to me that she was still dancing. In 1887, 5 years before he began work on the Chicago painting, Toulouse-Lautrec exhibited a group of fairly early works at the Goupil Gallery. Members of his family made the trip to Paris to see it, and his uncle Odon wrote, quote, "Perhaps he will forge his way in this style, but it's an ugly style. I would like beauty better." Toulouse-Lautrec did forge his way in that style, and this question of beauty lingers throughout his career. After his death, the singer Yvette Guibert, of whom there's a beautiful portrait upstairs in the galleries, she recalls the artist telling her, quote, "Ugliness, no matter where it is, always has a beautiful side. It's fascinating to uncover beauty where no one else can see it." It's not surprising that this has been one of the primary takeaways of the exhibition for visitors. I've been lucky to give tours to wonderful groups, including some of the people gathered here. And at each one, someone will ask, weren't the women in these paintings and prints unhappy with all the ugliness, with these unidealized likenesses, which is, of course, especially true if you look at paintings by John Singer Sargent or James Tissot, these sort of elegant, idealized visions of beauty. But I think that what these women liked about Toulouse-Lautrec's depictions of them was the inherent truth. They couldn't have known, their lives were glamorous then, in this image, but they couldn't have known what was ahead. We can hope against reason that May Milton did make it to New York and that she becomes lost because she settles into a comfortable life there. But we do know what happened to Jane Avril and Louise Weber. We know those unhappy endings. Toulouse-Lautrec made undeniably glamorous images of them, and they're true images as well, with distorted lighting, snarled expressions, and bodies caught at odd angles. These women were seen and understood by the artist. They appeared in the spaces that mattered to them, amid the communities that mattered to them. And so it's by branding himself as the painter of the Moulin Rouge, by capitalizing on the nightclub's reputation, and more importantly, on that of its leading ladies, that Toulouse-Lautrec is able to secure a place for himself as one of Montmartre's immortals. So I was very happy in preparation for this talk to be able to spend time thinking about the women in the painting. I'm happy to answer questions about the exhibition and the painting, but I did promise, and I have time to do it, I did promise to do a little bit of an acquisitions highlight. As Rachel mentioned, we've been acquisitive in the 19th and 20th centuries here in European art at MIA in the past year, and I wanted to touch on a few of the paintings that I'm especially pleased to have up in the gallery. So after this, you can run upstairs and see them if you haven't already. So first up, we have this extraordinary self-portrait by Ingeborg Westfelt-Eggertz, a Swedish artist. She's born in Stockholm in 1855. And she does what everyone with good sense does. When she's 18, she moves to Paris. And in 1883, and that is what launches her career. She had previously trained in Stockholm, but it's really moving to Paris that gives her the freedom to find herself as an artist. She finds a community of expat Swedish women artists, and they really form this strong artistic community that carries them through for the subsequent decade. She exhibits at the Salon, so she finds fairly extraordinary success as a woman artist, working in Paris in the 1880s. And critically, she also is able to find financial independence. So she works as an illustrator for a magazine back in Stockholm. She sends illustrations back there, and she also opens painting schools and takes on offers lessons as a private paintings teacher. She does decide to return to Stockholm in 1890, and that's when she makes this self-portrait. We're able to, it's not dated on the canvas, but we know that because she signs it with, she's married in 1892, and she signs this with her maiden name, so we know it must have been made before 1892. The later paintings are signed with her married name, but she does wear, the really attentive gossip mongers among us, like me, will know that she wears a wedding band, so perhaps she is already engaged. What really draws you in about this sparkling likeness of her is that smoked cigarette, and it's quite innovative, especially for Stockholm in 1890. It prefigures Edvard Munch's self-portrait with a cigarette by about 2 years, so she got there first. And it tells us something important about that I didn't know truly before I started working on this painting, which is the sort of cultural differences between Scandinavia and Paris, that smoking was acceptable for a woman of Westfelt-Eggert's social class in Paris, but was not acceptable in Stockholm. So this was seen as a very sort of subversive image. It is a symbol, the cigarette is a symbol of that bohemian decadence and deviance. And it's fun to imagine, too, that she's going to the Moulin Rouge, that this is sort of exactly contemporaneous with what Toulouse-Lautrec is doing. All these people are swirling together in the mix in Paris in the 1880s and 1890s. So it's easy to imagine, and we've seen many self-portraits of women artists where they depict themselves with a paintbrush, and she doesn't do that at all. She's looking outwards. She's a citizen of the world. She's making a statement about how she's chosen to spend the first part of her life. I really see this as a declaration of self-expression and independence, and that's what we love about this painting. It's also the apex of her career. If you're to look her up, you won't be thrilled by what you find that she makes after 1890. She sort of settles into a more routine kind of painting. And her lasting impact really, though, is that she opens and continuously runs for the remainder of her life a series of painting schools. So she's critical in understanding and specifically painting schools for women artists. And so she's critical for understanding that next and then subsequent generation of Swedish women artists. And I look forward to, in the years ahead, starting to untangle those threads and learning more about those Swedish artists who are little known comparatively in the United States. And so many of you know that we are building quite a beautiful collection of Scandinavian landscape paintings. Winter paintings, I'm told the fine people of Minnesota, of whom I am one now, love to see winter paintings in winter. It's madness to me. Look outside, guys. It looks just like that. But here you are. They're all upstairs now in 359, so go be cold upstairs after this. We have these two extraordinary Scandinavian winter landscapes. On the left, these predate me, on the left by Festad and on the right by Niemela. And I was so pleased early in my tenure here at MIA to add another to the group, this incredible painting by Väinö Blomstedt. You may not have seen this. This went up, I mean, truly, I think I was in London. I haven't, no, I saw it. I was there, actually, when we put it up. I'm just tired. It's extraordinary. It's up in the galleries now. He's a Finnish artist. Guess what he does? He travels to Paris. He goes to Paris in the 1890s, and he works with Gauguin. Our Gauguin Tahitian landscape is currently out on loan, but I'm so looking forward to putting the Gauguin and this together. I think it'll be so interesting to see what he takes from Gauguin, what he takes from Gauguin's studio. He returns to Finland around 1900, and he begins to work in the sort of state-sponsored art schools there. This is a critical period in Finnish history. This painting is made in 1904. Finland is administered by the Russian Empire at that moment, and the period of 1899 to 1905 is the first wave of Russification, as it's known, which is aimed at clawing back cultural and political autonomy for Finns. And Blomstedt is at the center of efforts to develop and fortify a cohesive, independent, artistic identity for Finland. That moment translates beautifully into this painting. You see these two trees at the center that are bending under the weight of Russian imperial expansion. What better symbol do we have of that than snow? But they are bending, not breaking, and beyond them a forest, formidable in its strength and numbers, sprawls out ahead. And that, I think, is sort of meant to represent Finland artistic identity and heritage. And what's terrific about having this painting in our collection specifically is it's a nice bookend with that Niemela, which is painted in 1919 after Finnish independence. Another new painting upstairs, Ludvig's Skramstad. I should tell you this painting is 8 feet across. It's extraordinary. We'll all run upstairs afterwards to see it. Another Norwegian painter. Foolishly, he does not go to Paris. He goes to Dusseldorf, and so he's a member of the Dusseldorf school. So I think your closest relationship that may be familiar to you all is, of course, the Hudson River School artists. You see a lot in common between Skramstad and those artists. By 1880, he's returned to Norway. He's developed a reputation as a painter of motifs specifically from eastern Norway, spruce forests, pine bogs, waterfalls, and of course, winter scenes. This painting is from around 1880. It's that height of his artistic achievements, thinly painted, layered with these really thin layers of oil paint. It has these sharp and blurry passages that show that he's looking at photography and thinking about how to absorb those techniques and apply, not those techniques, but that look and that style and apply it to painting. He's a mural painter as well, and so this is where he's really honing his skills of painting at scale. He makes bad financial decisions. And so by the late 1890s, he's moved to Munich and he's making one painting a day. So he really damages his reputation by doing that. He becomes known as a sort of routine painter of boring pictures. And so we are very fortunate to have this one, which is the absolute height of his artistic achievement. I truly don't think that there's a better Skramstad to be found anywhere, and ours can be found in Gallery 359. And then finally, whether more in line with my taste, we have Santiago Rusiñol, a warmer picture. Rusiñol is born to a bourgeois family in Barcelona. In 1861, he goes to Paris in 1889. He becomes the de facto leader of that bohemian group of Catalan expats in Montmartre. So he almost certainly would have had contact with Toulouse-Lautrec and his circle. An altogether different kind of painting comes out of that contact, though, doesn't it? He lives between Paris and Barcelona for the rest of his career, but the real turning point for him is when he makes a trip in 1891 to the fishing village of Sitges, and he begins to paint en plein air. So here we have a painting from Sitges of a patio made between 1892 and 1894, and he becomes famous for his paintings of patios and of gardens. There isn't a plein air landscape painting tradition in Spain as there is in France, and there's instead this tradition of painting gardens. Gardens are these semi-public idealized spaces, whereas Rusiñol is also interested in patios, altogether different because they're these private, intimate spaces. I've been calling them domestic exteriors. They're that extension of the family space outdoors. This painting, it's plains of colors. I love the peach pink buildings, the floor, that blue sky beyond. He translates the warm Mediterranean sun through shadows that are cast by the buildings and by that shade sail. He comes from a family of textile manufacturers, and that attention to the canvas of the sunshade gives that away, I think. He goes on to have this distinguished and fascinating career. He organizes these modernism festivals in Sitges. He has a studio at called Kaufrat in Sitges that you can visit today that is a museum of him. But what we have here now at MIA is this extraordinary patio picture, and we look forward in the years ahead to exploring more about this tradition of patio and garden painting in Spain and what that all means. So thank you. Those are, I think, the very best of what we've acquired in 19th and 20th century, and I'm happy to answer questions about Toulouse-Lautrec, the Moulin Rouge, and any of the paintings we talked about here.
First, thank you for a really entertaining and wonderful presentation.
Yep.
Can I ask you a question and make a comment?
Both, please.
The question first is, and you alluded to the term, and I'd thought of it before, that Toulouse-Lautrec had played a very important role in the whole concept of celebrity.
Yes.
And our modern, and if you wanted to comment on that. And the other thing, I just wanted to comment on the image of May when you talked about the greenness being related to electric light.
Mm-hmm.
I had thought that that was also a reference to the use of absinthe in that culture.
Yeah.
And if my last comment is that if you look at the recent, well, not recent, but the most recent movie on the Moulin Rouge, you have Nicole Kidman, who certainly is an ugliness. Actually, her image, as you go through the movie, look at this. If you look at her, you can see elements of Nicole Kidman's facial features. And as she transitions into illness, the cinematographers make her greener and greener until she passes.
That's interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And you're right, exactly. That Toulouse-Lautrec is, probably the most important French painter when it comes to our understanding of celebrity, both in fin de siècle Paris, but also celebrity, how we understand it today. So this is a moment where he's working with these stars of the Moulin Rouge, and I meant it when I said that their stars rise in tandem. He realizes that by attaching himself to these celebrity figures, first of all, he becomes a celebrity himself, which he no doubt enjoys. He's not an introvert. And he's able to make these images that reaffirm their celebrity, thereby reaffirming the value, both sort of artistically and also commercially, of his pictures. And so that's a story that's told through the labels in the exhibition. So I didn't want to be, and through some tours, and I recognized some faces from the tours, and I wanted to give you a little something, some new razzle-dazzle. And so you're right that that's a terrific story to call attention to, and that we do upstairs. Absinthe. You're right, absolutely, that green is the color of absinthe. I don't think that he's intending to signify that necessarily with this picture, but I have wondered if part of Maurice Joyon and the Comtesse de Toulouse-Lautrec's decision to cut the painting has to do with that association that we're making, would have been an association made in 1901, that not only is this the sort of ultimate scene of bohemian decadence by an artist who's just died a pretty excruciating death from alcoholism, among other things, if sort of removing that green face kind of sanitizes the picture of that reputation as well. And then I can't remember, the Nicole Kidman. I'm going to make a confession. I haven't seen it. I don't like musicals. I'll watch it. It's the one piece of exhibition homework I never got around to. I haven't seen. Nicole Kidman is beautiful. These women, you know from photographs, these women were beautiful too. But they're not idealized in his depictions of them. He doesn't take care to position them so that their elegant hands are folded in their laps so that you can see the specific piece of jewelry. You know, it's all about, I think, capturing them where they were in the moment. And I think that that is what they appreciated about his art. That's especially true for Jane Avril, with whom he's like a genuine lifelong friend. Are there other questions?
What do you know about the other 4 people seated at the table?
So I should have their names at my fingertips, and I don't. One is a photographer, Paul Sescao, I know that. I think that's this man here. All but one, this is Edouard Dujardin. This guy is not in the art world. But where his identity is known. This is, oh, you don't have to, I'm sorry, I thought my cursor was showing up. Okay. Edouard Dujardin, we know him, a symbolist writer. This is a dancer called La Maricona. Paul Sescao is one of these 2. He is a photographer. The other one is known, but not to me at this exact moment. Known to history, known to the labels upstairs. And this is the only figure that is not identified in the painting. But she is almost certainly a part of this circle. We're just not precisely sure of her identity. And because I've gotten this question on tours before, and it seems obvious to me because I've been working on this, but it's not maybe. We know these identifications both by likeness, that we knew what these people look like so we can identify them, but also by critical reception. So these paintings were exhibited when they were made, and then critics would go to them and they would talk about how this was May Milton. And so because they lived in this time and they knew these people, we trust their identifications. This is just the only woman who either is not mentioned in the criticism and whose facial features are not instantly recognizable. There's been suggestions of who she may be, but all but one are identified in the painting. Were there other questions? I think there's.
I like his signature or stamp.
Yeah.
Could you say if that's it's unusual for a signature like that?
It's not unusual. I'm trying to get to the Aristide Bruyon because they're interesting. They have a couple different kinds of stamps. It's part of that celebrity making that he makes his stamp so prominent. So his monogram here. He also signs them. He signs them and stamps them. So there's a huge body of scholarship on the kinds of stamps he's using. But it's part of the way that he's affirming his place in this world. Both that these posters are so recognizable. You would see this on the street, and it really couldn't be by anyone but Toulouse-Lautrec. And then by putting his monogram on there, he's further affirming his own status of belonging to this group of celebrities. And there's a print upstairs in the exhibition of a menu made for a dinner at the home of May Belfort that I think you would really like seeing if you haven't already, because it has his monogram at the top, and then he has a little cat chasing a mouse. The cat is the sort of what the performer May Belfort is best known for. She would carry a cat on stage. And so that's another way that he's tangling his own image up with that of the sitter and of the celebrity in these works of art. Yes, please.
Can I just yell it out here?
Yes, but then I'll repeat it because I think, I want to make sure everyone can hear.
So, how about other women in society at that time? Does he deal with anything other than dancers, and does the world of fame deal with other women?
Yes. The question was about depictions of other kinds of women outside of nightlife scenes in Toulouse-Lautrec's art. So this exhibition in my talk today focused on nightlife scenes, but he does make other paintings, and many of those paintings include images of women. He goes to the circus, so that's a specific kind of circus performer. I think is in the same category as a cabaret performer in many ways. But he does make images of other women. He makes more intimate images of them at home. He makes a large series of paintings of prostitutes for which he's very well known, but he makes other images of women who were in his social circle that are not images of celebrity. And then he paints members of his family. There's beautiful paintings he makes of his mother, other members of his family. So but they're never idealized. So the portrait I'm thinking of his mother is certainly a beautiful image, but it's not, he doesn't sort of elevate and sort of idealize her likeness. That's just not something that he's particularly interested in doing for his own art. And then in terms of your question about depictions of women by other artists, it runs the gamut. Like really, if you think about like the Monty Veiled Lady is a beautiful depiction of a woman, you know, from the 19th century in our collection. Or if you think, as I mentioned before, the paintings of John Singer Sargent and James Tissot, those are the artists that come to mind right away when we think about, you know, extraordinarily beautiful portraits of women. But those were commissioned for that specific purpose. You didn't commission Singer Sargent to make an image of you where you wouldn't look anything but extraordinary. And so women came to Toulouse-Lautrec for an altogether different kind of artistic project.
First of all, thank you for your presentation today.
Oh, hi. Yeah.
And I have a question. As we know, it's sort of hard to believe that Impressionism was not accepted as an art movement when it was first born, but as with everything, it takes time. And we know that the work of Monet and the rest, it was years before the art critics and the public accepted it. And sometimes it even took foreign financial support to bring that to light. With that in mind, how long did it take Toulouse-Lautrec's work to become accepted by the public as an official movement in art? And was he accepted by his colleagues who had been working so hard to have Impressionism be accepted by, like I said, the critics and the public?
That's a great question. Thank you. So, as Rachel mentioned, I just came back from London, where I was lucky to see Monet in London, which is an exhibition that Monet does of paintings he makes in London in the 1890s. And it was a reminder that by the 1890s, Monet is a celebrity in France. So I think with historical distance, I had the idea that, you know, it takes Monet a very long time, but it's important to remember that Monet in his lifetime, when he dies in 1927, is the most famous person in France, literally. And so they achieved that success in their lifetime. The same is not true for Toulouse-Lautrec. Because he dies in 1901, he dies at the age of 36. He does not live to see sort of mainstream acceptance of his art, although he does live to see a measure of success. And he does exhibit widely and is recognized for his artistic accomplishments. He's lucky again that he is recognized as an important figure in the history of French painting by the French state fairly early on. So I mentioned that in 1930, Musée d'Orsay purchased the various pictures, the various pieces of that painting of Louise Weber, and they put them back together. And those paintings are on view now, and they're sort of real treasures of that collection. So I think that it's fairly early. It's within 30 years of his death that he's really accepted as having made an important impact on the history of French art, due in no small part to the influence he has on that next generation. I think the influence of Toulouse-Lautrec on Picasso is sort of worth continued investigation, because you see that there's that next generation that's coming up in Paris, and when they're going to look at exhibitions, they're seeing Toulouse-Lautrec, but also when they're walking through the streets of Montmartre, they're seeing Toulouse-Lautrec, because these posters really become part of the visual culture of that moment early on, and that never fades away completely. I was surprised when I started working on this project by the acquisition date by the Art Institute of Chicago that they acquired their painting in 1920, I just said it, 28. Very early, especially the Art Institute is a fairly conservative institution at that point, and still is. I mean, they buy 36 Monets for a reason, like they have a specific taste. And this painting, God bless them. I mean, I would buy those too. But this painting is so not a haystack, right? It's so different from that. And another plug for Chicago, they buy Caillebott's Paris Street Rainy Day. Well, this is important for our history too. They buy Paris Street Rainy Day very early in the 60s. There's just the second American museum to acquire a painting by Caillebott. The first one's not even very good. And we're nipping at their heels. We acquire our Caillebott nudes soon thereafter. So we, like the Art Institute of Chicago, have extraordinary vision for understanding the future of French painting, looking backwards to the 19th century. We have one more question. Oh yeah, sorry. It's too much fun up here, sorry.
How much of his work was, thank you. How much of Lautrec's work was commercial, just to make money, as contrasted to perhaps just following an artistic vision?
It's hard to untangle those two things. He does not have enormous financial impetus to sell his work. So he does not require a patron to come and make a commission in order to pay his bills. His family does, I mean, he's from an aristocratic family. They never sever support for him. And I will say one of the hallmarks of Toulouse-Lautrec's life and really of his career is that his parents are very supportive of him. Specifically, his mother is very supportive of him. And you see that in the way that she continues to work to sort of secure a place for him in the French canon after his death, working with the dealer Maurice Choyon. So it's hard to say. I do think that even those commercial ventures where he agrees to do a poster, he accepts a commission to make a poster to advertise the Moulin Rouge, for example, even those commercial enterprises are driven by artistic interest. He certainly had the opportunity to, like, he didn't need to do that, but I think he's thinking both about what he wants to achieve artistically and then thinking about how those forward public-facing images can lift his own. He's very ambitious in when it comes to wanting to lift his own artistic reputation. Yeah. Thank you.